All right, well, welcome everyone. If we can move to the next slide. I'm Anita Brikman. I lead communications and public affairs at CHPA, the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, and I am joined by Lisa Kent of the Luminations Group. Hey, Lisa.
Hello.
So excited to have you as our first guest for this webinar series, but I know we may have some people joining who don't even know what the Women's Leadership Forum is all about. If we can take a look at the next slide. This is our mission. We're here to foster opportunities for education, networking, and professional growth to empower women in the consumer healthcare industry. Now, we began back in 2018 after seeing another initiative take root called the We Initiative, which empowers women across the retail and manufacturing sectors. It was launched at NACDS. We have cross-promoted events for each other. But also CHPA felt our member companies, both manufacturers and associates, could benefit from our own leadership forum, so that's what we launched. We had our opening reception in 2019 at the annual executive conference, AEC. It was a huge hit. So many men and women were there supporting us, all of our board of directors, many of them were there. It was fantastic. We have another event coming up at this AEC, so if you're going, please join us. It is on Sunday, March 22nd at 5 p.m. We've got a great program set up, so it's not going to be just a reception. There's a programmatic piece, but also an opportunity to network. And part of the other thing that we're doing is this, launching a webinar series. We are interested in nominations for people to be interviewed and also what topics you would like us to cover. So at any time, you can reach out to our moderators, or even when you get the PDF after this webinar is over, please email us back with any suggestions about what you would like to see. All right, so let's get to the interview itself with our special guest, Lisa Kent. Now, she was nominated by another member of the Women's Leadership Forum as a, quote, dynamic leader, great marketer, and a long-standing champion for women. She actually was the charging force behind getting a daycare center built at the Johnson & Johnson site in Skillman, New Jersey. At that time, many people told her that the idea might not be too popular and she shouldn't bet her career on it. Well, she was tireless. That center got built, and lots of mothers received the tremendous opportunity of having on-site quality daycare, which, as we know, can make a huge difference in work-life balance, something we're going to be talking about. In addition, Lisa's company, the Luminations Group, was comprised mainly of women at the beginning who, after having kids, preferred a more flexible work environment. So she doesn't just talk the talk, she walks the walk. The Luminations Group provided both a lucrative income and a flexible schedule for these mothers to play a larger, more present role in their children's lives while still having rewarding careers at a strategic level. In recent years, she has become the author of 3 books. We're going to see those later on in this webinar: Millennium Marketing, Inspiring Innovation, and Leveraging Leadership, which I understand has a chapter specifically for women, Pink Leadership. Lisa, welcome. I know you're also really big into mentoring. Can you tell me a little bit about what you do in mentoring right now?
I sure can. And thank you for having me and for that lovely introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think what we're doing today is the beginning of mentoring. First of all, anybody on the webinar is welcome to link in with me and to join my user group, which is called The Lumination. And then you can talk to everybody in there and have a automatic group of 400 to 500 mentors. What I do is both formal and informal mentoring. I have some formal mentoring arrangements. I mentor an MBA student at Lehigh, a number of junior marketers at corporations that are members of CHPA, but also informal, always available to answer questions, to share ideas, to bounce challenges off of. And I feel like one of the things women can do for each other and should do for each other is to be accessible and available. Now, we don't have enough time in our days, so you can't say yes to everything. And that's actually something I'm working on, not saying yes to everything. But being available, yes, right? Constant challenge. Can come to you and ask questions. Have you ever dealt with this? How would you present this? If you're seeking funding, how do you ask for funding? If you're asking for a promotion or a raise, what's okay to do? How do I merchandise myself in an ever-changing and transforming organization? And those are the kind of questions that over the 25 plus years I've been in the business, I've dealt with all of them. So you should feel free to ask me and other people who have been through what you have. And I promise you, most of us have been through similar situations.
So let's talk about one of the key things that came up in my introduction to you, work-life balance. I know it has certainly been a challenge for me at different times in my career as a communicator. How did you balance it in the past? How do you do it now?
Great question. And I would say, and I think I say this in my book too, there's really no such thing as balance in one moment in time. What we have to do is decide what are our priorities at a given moment. And that might be a big presentation at work, and it might be a Little League game. And we have to acknowledge that we won't be able to balance everything at once all the time, but that we pick our priorities carefully and balance day by day. I'll also say something I learned over time that has helped with balance is really not to be shy about getting help. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend a lot of money to have help, but have the help that you can at home and have the help that you can at work. Delegate, trust people, and use that help to be able to focus on what those priorities of the day are. Don't worry if you can't have balance every day in your life. Just in that segment of time, what's important to you, focus on it. Focus on your children, focus on your parents, focus on your work, and then move on to the next thing.
Well, speaking of parenting, what do you think has changed for working mothers over the years, the 25 years you've been in business?
So the changes involve working mothers, working dads, and not necessarily parents. Some of the changes in the workplace have been wonderful. Technology has enabled this very kind of learning and conversation where we can be anywhere. I'm in my office in New Jersey, you're in DC, and having a live conversation and collaborating on important issues. That didn't exist 20 years ago. Being able to sit on a football field and have a conference call with AirPods that block out the background noise. Also,
right.
Life easier, right? But some things have not changed. It's still important to have some face time in various offices, and you need to learn the culture of the place in which you work and set up appropriately. And I say for working moms and dads, because today it's okay to say you have kids and kids are your priority. Whereas 25, 30 years ago, that was something we hid, snuck off to a Halloween parade or a concert versus celebrated it. And if you ask me, we value parents much more today in terms of their understanding of our consumers, many of whom are in fact the consumers we need to market to in our businesses.
Very, very well said. Now, things have changed. I would agree with you as well over the span of my career, and that has been really exciting to see. But there are still some areas that are some industries that are very much male-dominated. Any advice for women trying to break into those?
Don't be afraid. That's something that took some time for me to learn too. Have confidence in yourself, and if you don't, fake it until you do. And recognize that your intelligence and your experience is relevant whatever industry you're in. At Luminations, we work in the CPG world, but we also work in technology and home goods and applications development. And these are very male-dominated fields, but it doesn't mean that they don't value the understanding of a consumer insight, how to do a strategic plan. Just have to stand up for what you know is right in the business. Let people know that consumers are consumers, customers are customers. It doesn't really matter what industry it is. And yes, sometimes you need to understand what it takes to relate to the men in the room. I had a boss once tell me, did you ever notice that in our Monday morning meetings, we always talk about the Sunday Times and the sports section of the Sunday Times? And I said, yeah, I did notice that. And I felt left out. I was the only woman in the room. And he said, well, do you have the Sunday Times? And I said, yeah, I read it every weekend. He said, Well, read the sports page. So, right. Okay, I read the sports page. Actually, it was pretty interesting. And as my boyfriend says, the only part of the news that's always pretty good. And in fact, had something to talk about with the folks in the room. So try to gauge what's important to them, what resonates with them, and without being disingenuous, make an effort to align. And I think that also helps with men in the room. If you don't play golf,
that's fantastic.
it's okay, but you need to be able to connect on some level. Doing good work means connection. And in order to be able to collaborate, you have to trust each other and so understand each other.
That sounds great. I also want to remind people online with us that you can submit questions. Farley, can you remind people how they can submit questions or comments right now?
Yep, you can submit questions by just going to the little chat box that is in your, on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can submit questions. I haven't received any questions yet.
Okay, just wanted to check on that. Let's go ahead and move on through to the next slide, if we could. Here are some of the key takeaways that Lisa has provided us. Now, all of these are going to be sent. There's a lot to go through here. All of these are going to be sent in a nicely cleaned up PDF for you that will follow this webinar. These takeaways are from her books. Let's be specific on marketing. What would be the main thing you want people to take away on marketing? And in particular, I was very interested in the data issue because I know everything nowadays is data driven. Talk to me about that.
So we're all drowning in data today, and that's a good thing and a bad thing, right? We can leverage it and we should leverage it, and getting our arms around the voluminous amounts of data is important. So learning what's critical and how to analyze it is something that's important to success. We may not need to look at all the data. We need to figure out what is the data we need to get our arms around. And then secondarily, equally important, and this happens as you develop in your career, trust your gut. So there's data, and then there's instinct and intuition. And I think marketing is part art and part science, and you need to merge both, data and intuition. Leverage the data, use dashboards to help you analyze, and think hard, what does your gut tell you to do? That's data. I would also say that if we're not careful, we can be overwhelmed by it. And so thinking about how to determine what's important is a priority in doing business well. Analytics surround us, but we can't look at everything and act on it.
I think that's very good advice.
Other key takeaways, just thinking about marketing. One has to do with strategy. I say vehicles change. I'm writing a course, I told you now, on mobile marketing technologies. What exists today will be very different tomorrow. Technologies change, the types of marketing change, but good strategy never does. So learning how to develop a good strategy and holding true to that, that will never change. And that's important for any business in any field, technology, consumer packaged goods, healthcare, or otherwise. So if you have to focus on anything early in your career, learn how to generate great strategy. And with us, when we teach that, we teach very simply, what questions do you need to ask to develop a strategy? And that's in the book too. And the third thing I think that I talked about was putting the consumer at the center, putting the consumer, the customer, or the patient at the center of everything that we do. And sometimes, and data is part of this, we get a little lost and we forget to whom we're speaking, to whom we're selling, to whom we need to resonate with. And so, as a result, our strategy goes afield. So remembering to put the consumer or the customer or the patient at the center of everything we do will not steer us wrong. And that also has not changed over time in marketing.
Right, it is that human component we can't lose sight of in the numbers. Before we move on, I do understand we have a question. Farley?
our question that we just received is, what advice would you give women in the middle stage of their careers versus those just getting started about how to determine the best professional path for you?
So my mom always says, you don't have to know what you want to be when you grow up, just what you want to do next. In the middle of my career, I pivoted a lot. I moved from traditional consumer packaged goods, first Procter & Gamble, then Nestle and Johnson & Johnson, to a startup technology firm. In fact, the first nationwide online grocer, at kind of a dopey time to do that. We didn't really have the broadband that made that work. I did it because I knew what I wanted to learn next was how to be a successful entrepreneur and how to lead an emerging company. That's all I knew. I couldn't have said, I really want to be in the online grocery field. I couldn't have said what I was going to do next. Just this next step for me was learning how to run a startup company. So think about what you want to do next and what you want to learn next and what you want to add to your portfolio of skills. And then the journey comes. The next thing will happen and you'll decide, is that right for you? But don't put pressure on yourself, middle of career or even early in career, on deciding what that whole path is going to look like. 10 years is a long time in our career. 20 years is a lifetime. So just think about, what do you want to do next? And don't worry about the rest.
I love that advice. When you were talking about going into something that was at a dopey time, it made me think about failure. If we do anything long enough, it's not going to be that trajectory right up that mountain. We're going to fail. What is your advice in failing and getting up and keeping going?
Well, so you basically said it. You have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and move on. Take what you can from it, learn what you can from it, and move on. And I think as women, and I can certainly say for myself, I'm very much of a perfectionist. So I take it hard when I fail at something. And believe me, I do fail at things. And so we have to recognize that that's a learning experience and not just a failure. It's not a black mark. It could be a green mark, because failing teaches us something that if we quickly move on, learn from it, can make us stronger, better, faster. When I interview candidates, one of my most important questions is, talk to me about a time when you did not succeed and what did you do about it? Because that, to me, is a true testament of how they're going to do in an environment that's ever changing. And I think we can safely say there is no work environment that's not ever changing today.
Yeah, I've gotten that question myself in several interviews, so I do appreciate that you ask it as well. Let's move on to our next slide of some of your key takeaways on work and family. So we did talk about that there's no way to balance everything all the time, and you've got to just have those shifting priorities and be okay with that. What I like is the statement, our kids will grow up and move out, but we're probably going to work until we're 75. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it to 75, but I am at the stage where I'm almost an empty nester. And it's daunting in some ways, but it's also exciting. Talk about that whole idea of the marathon, not the sprint.
So this is my philosophy, and it has taken time to develop. In fact, I had a whole third child because I didn't want to be an empty nester. But guess what? They grow up too, right? So he's got a year left at home also. And I will tell you that our work careers are going to be long. Maybe you're not going to work till you're 75. Probably I am. But you're going to work for a long time. And during that period, you'll have your ups and downs. And it will be important to grow and develop and get promoted. But that window of time when you have a child at home, that's pretty finite. That's less time than our careers for most of us. And it goes by in the blink of an eye. So what we can do to really relish it, to be present if we can, and to not worry if, oh my gosh, we missed something extra at work, to be with a child whether that's going to impact us. Now, I say that, and I also say that as women, we're not great about networking all the time. When we have to make a trade-off, we often pick our families. And it's not just parents of children. Many of us are taking care of aging parents as well, too.
Right.
That's an important decision to make, too. So don't take lightly networking opportunities at work that other people may take advantage of. Choose wisely, choose carefully, something with your family and something with your business. And those networks of women, CHPA being one of the most wonderful networks that I've joined in the past couple of years, do a lot for our careers long term, whether it's within one company, within a category, or beyond. So try to choose some of those and lots of time with your family. And I don't want to let working dads out either. You know, today men
Absolutely.
can take paternity leave and do and should and have as much responsibility at home as women. So they're making these decisions too. Whereas you asked me what changed maybe 20 years ago, not so much. So they too should think carefully about how to devote time to the family and to their relationships, and also how to be present at work when they're there. Be present wherever you are.
I try to do that every day, which leads us to the next thing, which is about gratitude, something I try to practice every day. I do better some days than others. So let's go to the next slide if we can, and talk to me a little bit about the aspect of learning and gratitude. I hadn't thought of those two together until I saw your key takeaways.
So I put it in this category because to me, learning is a gift. On a day when I can learn something new, I feel like that was a good day. On a day when I can teach something new to somebody, also a good day. And so that goes in my category of gratitude. And as you know, I try to do a lot of teaching and giving back as a result. I talked already about the quote from my mom, so we can skip over that.
This next one I love. It's the idea of like putting things into perspective.
Yeah.
I often tell my team, especially if we're dealing with somewhat of a media crisis or whatever, you know, we are not performing brain surgery here.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to do the best we can with the speed and accuracy that we can. But you make a great point here. We've got to remember that we are rarely risking our lives, or that other people's lives are not completely dependent on what we do.
Right, which is not to say what we do isn't important. And in fact, a lot of us are working in healthcare and do impact people's lives. But stepping back and having some perspective. If you have a bad day, if your presentation doesn't go the way that you planned, if you make a recommendation that didn't work out well, okay. So now we learn and we move on. You know, I have two very good friends who are surgeons, and when they have a bad day, the outcome might have been a baby that's born with cerebral palsy. When I have a bad day, the outcome is I'm going to go back and try again to make my client happy. And so really having perspective generally about what we do, which is something, by the way, I did not have when I was junior. Everything was a crisis. Helps to move on. And to do that thing we talked about earlier, which is learning from failure instead of beating ourselves up when we might have a failure or an outcome that we don't like. Now I say this, but it's hard because now I have a son who's a doctor. So I'm telling all my friends and my colleagues to keep things in perspective, but I can't really say this to him. I can't say, well, actually, you know, it's not that big of a deal. Someone's life is not in your hands. And to him, I say, you do the best you can. That's all we can do, is give our best effort and trust that that is enough, that we're smart, that we're talented, that we're experienced, and you do the best you can. And then if you have a bad outcome, and he might, you go to bed at night knowing you did everything you could.
You just gave me goosebumps, Lisa. That's fantastic. My daughter is planning to study medicine, and I have some of those same worries. Yeah, wow. All right. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions come in?
One of the questions that came in is, what do you think the best way to reach out to someone that you would like to ask to be a mentor, or that has a job that seems very interesting to you? What's the best way to reach out to someone that you admire?
A great question, and I will tell you one that I myself face. So I wrote this book on leadership, and I wanted to talk to leaders that I admired. And some I knew personally, and many I did not. And shockingly, when I reached out and I said, I really admire your leadership style, can I interview you for my book? Almost universally, they said yes. And then they said, I have this friend who's a leader, a CEO of a company, a head of a nonprofit, somebody who has inspired women in sub-Saharan Africa. You got to talk to her or him. And they said yes. So I think what you have to do is have the courage to ask. And when you ask, you will be pleasantly surprised that most of us want to say yes, want to share what we've learned. And if they say no, okay, move on. There's lots of other great people to ask. But mostly all you have to do is nicely say, I admire what you've done. Would you have time to talk to me? And I mean, I had more interviews. In fact, from the book, I'm thinking of starting my own series of interviews because there's so many people that I wanted to interview. I couldn't get them all into the book. So just ask. And if you ask me and I say no, it's not no forever. It might be no for now because I told you I'm trying to learn not to say yes to everything. You know, is there a good way to do it? Can we do a quick email? Can we do a quick phone call while you're driving? What's the most convenient way for me to connect with you? I would ask that as well.
Perfect. I want to make sure we share some information. We've only got a couple minutes left. So, do you want to get involved with us? You can find out more about the Women's Leadership Forum on the CHPA website. We are open to all manufacturer and associate members of the association. We have regular, quarterly at least, calls that we schedule. We have an advisory group of members that helps us with programming ideas, the receptions. We try to have a presence at every conference, but we do have a place that you can visit us on the CHPA website. Lisa's website, there it is for the Luminations Group, and I mentioned the WE initiative at the beginning of this webinar. Their URL there is forwe.org. So the WE initiative, which spans retail and manufacturing in the healthcare space. So there's the WE initiative. You can also email us directly, WLF@chpa.org. And we have a LinkedIn group as well, and you can request to join that. Now, all of this information, including Lisa's takeaways, our contact information, all of that is going to be coming to you in a PDF. This webinar will also be recorded, and we will let you know when that is available. And we invite you to please share it with colleagues and friends who might get some inspiration here. We, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, are also looking for all your ideas or suggestions about topics that we can tackle. Is it salary negotiation? Is it workplace and forging strong supportive relationships? What is it that we could be talking about that would be helpful to any of you, no matter what stage of the career you are in? And a final reminder, as I said, we will have a reception at the Annual Executive Conference Sunday evening at 5 p.m. on March 22nd. Everyone is invited who is attending AEC. We will also have events at our upcoming conferences, including the marketing conference, so look for more information about that. I'm Anita Brikman. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. This was a fantastic discussion.
Thanks, and join CHPA if you're not a member. It's worth it, and they listen.
I love that plug, Lisa. No better way than that to end. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye-bye.